So this question is a tough question. Year 11 came out of their exam saying, so what was it all about? It's a tricky question, so there's no shame in looking at that and going, oh goodness me, what's that all about? But hopefully I'll shed some light. And the first thing is I'd only really do 2 paragraphs. There are a number of ways to do it. Your teachers will almost certainly do something different to what I would do, but I would have broken it down into how religion created new definitions of crimes against authority and government. So, religion, especially the Reformation of the 1500s, because Henry split the country into Catholics and Protestants, it meant, well, that was obviously a big religious change, but it also meant that the king became head of the church. So whereas before if you committed a crime against the church it was heresy, well, it could also be defined as treason and heresy, if you committed something against the church, because the king, or queen, became the head of the church. You've also got the issue that at different times it was not legal to practice in a Protestant way or not legal to practice in a Catholic way. So this was creating new definitions of a crime against authority because depending who was in charge, it changed the definition of what was the law and what wasn't. And also, towards the end of the medieval period, some people were speaking out against the church, so they had to introduce heresy laws, which is a new definition of a crime against authority. You could not commit heresy because it was some new laws which were brought in the later medieval period. The government, though, I would have as my main reason. My line of reasoning here is, although much of this, all of this was to do with religion, it was the government, or rather the monarch in charge, who chose to change the definitions of crimes against authority. So I'll give you some examples. When the Normans took over, they changed the definition of crimes against authority by bringing in the church courts, so you'd be committing crimes against the church and they have their own courts to deal with it. But also the forest laws was a change in crime against authority because you weren't allowed to trespass on their land or use it for wood or for hunting. And so that became a crime against authority. And also the murderum fine. It's like if you murder one Norman, you're all going to be punished for it. It is a crime against authority rather than a crime against just that one person that was murdered. Also, the fact that the Reformation happened was because Henry changed his policy, which led to religious changes. Henry wasn't probably massively motivated by religion, but more by his need for a divorce and the want for a son, which he wasn't getting. So the monarch's decision, the monarch being the government, or a large part of the government, his decision to change what he wanted led to new definitions of crime against authority in the Reformation. And then we've got Mary took over. She was Catholic and she wanted people to not be Protestant anymore. She made them recant their faith or they would be burned. And so she brought in a new definition. You weren't allowed to practice in a Protestant way. So there's my line of reasoning again. That is a tricky question. You'll notice I mentioned poaching. Well, forest laws could be doing with poaching. These bullet points could be in there to completely stitch you up. I wouldn't be using poaching in there as a crime against authority, really. So just don't worry about these bullet points. If you've written about poaching, unless it's in the guise of the forest laws, you've probably gone out of the period of 1700. And sometimes I think they put the bullet points in there specifically to trip you up, to make you think, oh, I've got to use them. So don't panic about the bullet points. And the same is true for these questions.